Motherhood is all-consuming.
Having babies, nursing, feeling the fear of loving someone that much.
And there's this baby on your chest, and boom, your entire life has changed.
It's a privilege of being your child's safest space and watching your heart walk around outside of your body.
The truth is, I can be having the best time being a mum 1 minute, and then the next I'm questioning all my life choices.
I'm Lo Mansfield, your host of the Lo and Behold podcast, mama of 4 littles, former labor and postpartum RN, CLC, and your new best friend in the messy middle space of all the choices you are making in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. If there is one thing I know after years of delivering babies at the bedside and then having and now raising those 4 of my own, it is that there is no such thing as a best way to do any of this. And we're leaning into that truth here. With a mix of real life and what the textbook says, expert insights, and practical applications, each week we're making our way towards stories that we participate in, stories that we are honest about, and stories that are ours. This is the Lo and Behold podcast. If you have ever tried to breastfeed a baby, I am certain that you know it comes with 10,000 highs and lows and joys and successes and victories and failures and all the things, right? And one thing I've noticed at the bedside, and then of course just being the mom myself and having goals for this whole breastfeeding thing, is just that desire to get off to the best start. And so I reached out to my friend Amber for today's episode because I just wanted to talk through that idea of best start with her and kind of the decisions that we make in the early days, the early weeks, even, the early hours we're going to talk about of breastfeeding and how to do that in a good way and a healthy way and navigate when that is imperfect, because a lot of times it is, and then how to keep moving forward in that. So Amber Ginn is going to join me today. She's a board-certified lactation consultant. That's that IBCLC acronym that you might hear thrown around sometimes. She's the founder of the Latch Link, which is one of the nation's leading virtual lactation practices. She's got over 8 years of experience. She specializes in helping moms fix their latch issues, increase supply, and then just navigate feeding challenges with confidence, with a lot of clarity. She is known, and I think you'll hear in our convo, for just her kind of no-fluff, straight-talking style and a really deep belief that you are the boss of your body and your feeding choices you're making for your baby. With that company, the Latch Link I mentioned, she offers virtual consults, accessible online courses, and judgment-free support designed to simplify breastfeeding for you without sacrificing your effectiveness. So I loved this conversation with Amber. I found it really valuable. And I liked thinking about it from the perspective of labor nurse or lactation consultant, those titles that I hold, but also get her obvious expertise in the area too. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I know that it's going to be super valuable for you, especially as you possibly prepare for getting off to your own best start in these next few weeks or months. Hello, everybody. So I am so excited today. I have brought on a friend and a colleague, someone I get to do some professional masterminding with as well. So it's been really fun to get to know Amber. But Amber Ginn is with us today. She is an IBCLC who has spent years and years. I'll let her tell a little more about herself, dedicating herself to mamas and making their breastfeeding journeys better. I'll let her give you a more personal info about who she is and what she does. And then we'll get into our conversation today too. All right, Amber, why don't you go ahead and say hey and tell us who you are a little bit more personally too.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. It has been a real pleasure getting to know you and seeing all the amazing work that you're doing. So, my name's Amber. I'm a board certified lactation consultant. I got into this work after having my first child right before I turned 16. I did not have the birth that I wanted, and I was hanging on to the last branch of hope that I could get breastfeeding right, and it was not going right in the beginning. And so I ended up getting some support from a breastfeeding peer counselor at the WIC office. And it set my feeding journey on a trajectory where I was able to meet my breastfeeding goals. I was able to get a pump, and I held this massive pump back and forth to school for a whole year. And it just was so impactful on my journey across my entire life, but especially as a mother, that I was like, this is what I want to do. Because if I can just provide a fraction of that hope and confidence to other moms, it would be such a good way to spend my life and my career. So that's how I got into lactation. I transitioned from doing in person work to virtual work when I saw that a lot of times in person work shows moms how to do stuff right in the moment, but it doesn't always give them the skill and understanding that they need to be able to replicate those things. And so it can be really hard to get in with people. You finally get in with someone and then you forget everything you learned. So virtual care lets me have really great continuity of care and teach moms how they can get that repeatable latch or understanding of how to increase their supply. And so I really have loved doing what I have been doing for the past 8 years. I've worked with thousands of moms, and yeah, I love breastfeeding and infant feeding. And like you said, I'm a really no fluff person. I just like to support moms where they are, and I don't like to bring any of my own baggage into feeding recommendations, which unfortunately can happen sometimes, especially on social media.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I like that you brought up the pros of virtual consultation, education, especially with you guys, because I think so many people assume lactation consultants, it's like, I need them to be right in front of me. That's the most effective thing. But it is true. As soon as you walk away from them, they're gone, right? And so the idea of continuity of care actually existing often way better online or in a better way, maybe for a longer term, is actually so valuable. And I think that it's good for people to hear that the online space, you are just as effective because I know what you do and I know how you do it. And you can continue to see moms as long as they need to see you and kind of as often as they need to see you too, because there's just less boundary to access when you can jump on here like you and I are right now, see each other, chat, and then log off and do it again, you know? So I think it's a good thing to keep reminding people of. Also, it's kind of a good segue. So my hope today was to talk to you a little bit about kind of speaking to these pregger mamas right now, talk to you about a little bit of your ideas of how to prepare for breastfeeding in general. And then that getting into the hospital, those moments where you do have nurses or lactation consultants and people who are helping you and they have this input. But then, of course, you do go home and walk away from those people as well. So I wanted to kind of tackle those 24 hours or so, get some insight from you. And then, of course, like I said as well, a little bit of your thoughts on the prep or what you feel like your mom should do if they come. That's probably part of prep, but if they come talk to you before having a baby as well. So, how do you answer that question? How can I prepare for breastfeeding right now? And I'm 7 months pregnant or whatever.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, understanding what their goals are. I think whether it's your goals around how you want your birth to go or how your feeding goals are, I think it's super important to understand what they are and why you have them. That way you can have, the gumption you're going to need to carry through. Because if you're choosing to breastfeed just because you read in a book that it's the best choice for your baby, but you don't understand the different, not cons, but things that can come up and can go sideways, then it can be harder to stick it out because you're not as informed about potential hiccups and how you can remedy them. So I would say understanding a full picture of what it is you want to do and why will be like the first step when it comes to setting yourself up for breastfeeding success prenatally.
So I like the idea of like understanding the why as well, because I do think so many of us just think this is what we want to do. And that's great, right? Like I know that it's a good thing. I know that it's something that's valuable for my child and myself. So this is what I'm going to do. But to have that a little bit more of why, like this is why I care about it this much. And this is what the benefits are. I think it does help you lean into those things a little bit, especially when it does get hard and you can remind yourself of your why. It makes me think of working with VBAC moms. And it's like it's great to want a VBAC, but also why do you want that? Like having a really specific why that you can hold on to should you meet challenges or you can't build a team and it just feels frustrating, like being able to fall back on that. So, okay. So let's assume we've done some good prep. Actually, do you have any beyond that education and that kind of foundation for Mama's building, like really practical, like I think you should see an IBCLC before, or I think you should practice XYZ before. I know that it can be different for everyone, but do you have anything else that you kind of tell people, do this, read this, try this before
Yeah,
labor or birth actually starts?
for sure. I would definitely say meet with an IBCLC prenatally. If you have insurance, you can get as many prenatal consults covered as you want. The only stipulation there is Aetna, they have limits. But other plans, yeah, you can get care prenatally as well. And then we can get into that. Why are you breastfeeding? What are your goals? Everything like that. That way you're not just, and not, no shade about anything, but a lot of moms are like, well, I just want to exclusively breastfeed. But it's like, well, when do you want to introduce bottles? And they're like, yeah, well, at some point. It's like, well, how often do you want to pump? And they're like, sometimes. And it's like, well, we want to have a really clear understanding of like, when are we doing these things and why are we doing them? So I would say working with an IBCLC prenatally, then you can get all of that cleared up so that you know kind of why and what you're doing. And in addition, go over a lot of the things about just hiccups that we see in positioning or when to get more help. And kind of like you were saying, knowing how to play ball with different hospital staff and how to advocate for yourself, and knowing when certain phrases might sound scary, but they're really not. And all of that stuff is really useful for sure.
How often do you feel like moms actually come in and do a preemptive before I'm having a baby lactation consult? Do you see it very often?
Yeah, I would say probably 30% of my new clients are prenatals.
Okay, that surprises me. That's awesome. Because I think that we hear that advice a lot, but a lot of us, including myself, granted, I'd been a nurse at the bedside, so I'd had some education and hands-on learning for a while. But like, I don't know that I ever would have thought I'm truly going to meet with someone before my baby's here just to like get ready. And I tell people to do that. So I've always wondered, are people listening? Because I do think it's so valuable to make that game plan and have a person in your corner. That's one thing I talk about a lot is, let's say someone decides to spend that prenatal time with you. You're also the person they know they can go to as soon as the ish hits the fan after, if it does, and it's so nice, I think, to know I'm going to email Amber right now. It's 2 a.m. on the third night or whatever, and not have to then search, through your insurance coverage, your providers or whatever. Like, you found your person, you figured it out, you did the work, because for the good chance you're going to want that person. Like, I think all of us could benefit from lactation help after, even when it's going well, like that support and that encouragement, super valuable. Anyways, that is surprising, but also really encouraging to me. Although it'd be great if that number were higher. Okay. So we talked about playing, like you just mentioned, like playing ball with the hospital staff. So I wanted to jump into that because I think I have been that postpartum nurse a lot of times who has been the one walking in the room, handing out advice, trying to help, maybe delivering news like, oh, the baby's lost weight, here's the plan of care, things like that. And so I wanted to kind of lean into some of those questions a little bit and kind of bigger, broader overview. In a perfect world, if you're setting your moms up prenatally and talking about like the first couple hours with the baby, what's the big goals here? What would you be telling them for related to getting off to, quote unquote, the best start breastfeeding? Like, here's what we want to be shooting for those first, 4 hours or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say, like you're saying, optimal setting, uninterrupted skin to skin, you and baby. When the nurse comes in and offers to help you latch your baby, politely say no, thank you, because it is not helpful to have someone. And I'm sure some nurses are lovely and they just kind of sit back and they just watch and they offer help when it's needed. But I have so many clients who are like, yeah, the nurse came in and latched her. And I always like to ask, like, oh, what do you mean by that? And they're like, yeah, she grabbed my boob and she grabbed the baby and she pushed her head on there. And it's like, we want to let babies' instincts flow naturally from the very beginning. We don't want to interrupt them in any way that we can. So uninterrupted skin to skin, letting baby take the lead on when and how to latch. That's the main thing. Not being worried about how long it takes to latch, like you're saying, within 4 hours. Assuming an initial latch happens within 4 hours, we're doing great. And so that would be what I would say: uninterrupted skin to skin, and just let baby latch. Don't let anyone manipulate things in the sense of like not that word, but like physically have to come in and intervene if you can. In my professional opinion anyway. Obviously, if someone feels like they need that additional help and wants hands-on help, that's totally fine.
It's interesting. I can like see some specific moms right now who, baby's laying on their chest doing, the right things or whatever. We've got that skin to skin going on. But sometimes you do get the patients where they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, help me. And there is that dance of like, there's nothing to do right now, right? Like, baby's happy, you're fine, you can just hang out there. Or there is sometimes the point of like, you get the moms who truly have it's like they're nervous to use their own body and like use their own hands too. So there's this like funky navigating, which again, that kind of goes back to the prenatal conversations that if you're having these with the IBCLC, that they can kind of prepare you and talk to you about like, what you can and can't do, what is not can or can't do, but like what you should expect, like what to expect of your own body and babies, and like how this might go and how this might feel. Because I do think sometimes it's hard that first time you're kind of looking at the baby and looking at yourself. And if you haven't done a little work, or maybe you're just not as comfortable with these like processes in your body, then you're still kind of sitting there like, I'm glad the baby's here. I still have like no idea what comes next or how to
For sure.
participate in that. So it's kind of
Definitely.
an interesting balance. So let's say you don't get skin to skin, because obviously this happens for a different variety of different reasons. Like, do you have any specific suggestions about that, or more just as soon as you guys get that time or as soon as you are together, just carry on? Like,
Yeah, so like skin to skin where baby is taken away maybe to like a NICU stay or something, that's a little bit different to navigate. But if there's something going on maternally, then skin to skin can be established with dad or whomever, your partner, whoever's there, and that's completely fine. I would say in a situation where you're have a prolonged space from baby and you can't establish that first latch, using colostrum, spoon feeding, cup feeding, syringe feeding, any of those things can be good if doctors are getting worried about like blood sugar or hydration or any of those things. So I would say just kind of navigating depending on what's going on with mom and baby. And that's something that we always go over in prenatals too, is like what's our like emergency contingency plan if things were to
right.
happen, if you're separated or if baby needs to go somewhere. So I think generally speaking, skin to skin with someone is better than no one. And you have other options besides just using formula or a bottle if those are things that aren't aligned with your goals.
Yeah, I liked addressing that question because I think a lot of times moms, even looking backwards, can feel shame, sadness, or whatever about not getting skin to skin. And then maybe if breastfeeding didn't go really well or didn't start off really well, there's this idea that like it's because you didn't get the skin to skin. And I just think it's important to say, like, we can get started as soon as we can with all the things.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Oh no, I have plenty of moms who their beginning, maybe even 7 days or longer was just like a mess. It was not what they wanted at all. And we can always do a lot with what we have now. And we should never think about it. I mean, you have children too. My oldest is almost 17. Like as a mom, you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, I messed some stuff up.
Mm.
So you just gotta
Yeah.
keep moving. So
Yeah.
with breastfeeding, especially, our bodies and our babies are very resilient. So you can always do skin to skin, and I always tell moms as well, like skin to skin is not just for in the hospital. Like you can, whenever you're able to do it again, go for it. Yeah, so it's not, no worries. I mean, feel your feelings, they're always valid if something went wrong, but just always understand that you can change things going forward. It's not like you missed it entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important. I'm just going to reiterate that like skin to skin has a ton of value moving forward. And that comes into like milk supply and breastfeeding and bonding at home. Like, yeah, that first hour, that first 90 minutes, however long you get or choose to do, is valuable and precious. And so I understand people grieving if they don't get that or if something happens. But it has so much benefit for the two of you for really as long as you're both enjoying it. Like, it's not just a week or the next few days. Like you could be doing this months down the road if you love it, or if you're taking tubs together or whatever. And it still has a ton of great value for the two of you. So yeah, hear that. If you miss it for some reason, just get to it as soon as you can or you want to. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit prior that let's say baby doesn't latch for the first 4 hours, sleepy or whatever. Do you like to lean into like hand expression or expressing some milk, doing something else while we're waiting, maybe for sleepy baby to wake up or for the latch to actually be effective while you're both learning or whatever? Is there some like
Yeah.
other ways to kind of fill those gaps if we're dealing with those things early on?
For sure. Yeah. So in like a situation where it's been like more than 4 hours and a latch still hasn't been established, I mean, I think expressing colostrum prenatally towards the end can be a great way to have that on hand if that's something that works with your health and your journey and everything. That can be really good. Otherwise, I think I encourage moms to, kind of not start using a pump within the first like 12 hours if they can help it, just because that's just extra stuff to be doing. And we don't want to just start off doing that because that just I've seen can add layers if we feel like we're having to do this triple feeding stuff that is not typically super fun for most moms. So I would say hand expression is a great way though to get some milk flowing to give baby, because initially, as you know, like their tummies are teeny tiny and they don't need very much. So a little hand expression can go a long way. You don't need to pull out the like Cadillac of breast pumps. They usually have like a symphony that's like this intense machine. You don't usually need that. So yeah, using the hand expression can be a great way. And like I said, cup, spoon, syringe, like a feeding tube, different ways to feed baby that are not a bottle if that's something you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. I like the prenatal, antenatal colostrum collection conversation. It's wild. I'm sure you weren't doing this when you had your first baby when you were 16. When do you feel like that even really entered the conversation as prevalently as it is now? I feel like it's been pretty recent.
Yeah,
Like,
I think so. I feel like in the last, like, maybe, like, certainly less than 3 years, I would
yeah,
say, like, for sure. I definitely think it's gotten, like, like, a hot thing
yeah,
in the past, like, even year. I feel like it's everyone's talking about it, and it's one of those things that I think can be awesome, especially if you have something like gestational diabetes. It can be
yeah.
great. That way, if baby has blood sugar issues afterward. But otherwise, it's just like everything else, do your research, see if it fits well for you. I have some moms who are like, well, how do I do this? And they seem really frustrated. And I'm like, is this something you want to do? And they're like, well, I
N-
saw on TikTok.
Right.
And I'm like, you don't have
Exactly.
to. You don't have to do everything you saw on TikTok. So yeah, it's just a personal thing.
Just
Pros and
to
cons to everything.
just to go backwards in case you are actually someone who's still like, what are they talking about? Colostrum collection prenatally essentially is just like hand expressing in the last couple weeks before baby is born. If colostrum comes out, it is in there. So, like, we would want you to hear that your body is making colostrum. Not everybody expresses it out well. Not everybody leaks. That's fine. No indication of supply post birth. But some people actually will express it, collect it in like little syringes and things that you can freeze, and then you can give to your baby after birth. And so, like I was asking her about this practice, I never heard about it with my oldest currently is 8 or my 6-year-old. It was like just coming on the scene with my current 4-year-old and then all over the place with my current 1-year-old. So I've done it with some of my kids. I've not done it with some of my kids personally have breastfed all of them like just the same or well, however you want to say. So I don't want you to think you missed the mark or you're missing the mark. Like Amber said, if you don't want to do this, it's fine. And if you want to try it and lean into it, that's great too. Like it's a valuable practice. And if you don't do it, it doesn't have an indication of what's going to happen after birth. I will say I like it. And even for my own body and my own self, I liked the practice as prep just to get really comfortable with hand expressing. Cause I did use a hand expression a lot, like after my most recent birth. I was doing a little bit in between feeds when she wouldn't eat. And I was giving her what we had collected and hand expressing when I'm super engorged. Like just being comfortable with that skill, I think has some value, whether or not you're trying to collect 10 mils of colostrum or whatever before your birth is to me neither here nor there either. But yeah, has some value, but isn't something to hinge your entire like breastfeeding story on. I'm assuming.
Definitely.
I'm assuming you would agree with that.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. So I know when we had talked a little bit prior, you talked about birth decisions that can impact breastfeeding. And so before we kind of go to the hours moving forward postpartum, I wanted to stick on that for a minute and just kind of hear your thoughts or what you would want moms to hear about some of that, like things in birth that can happen and maybe impact breastfeeding, impact weight loss, things like that that can come up for us in those first, 2 to 3 days or beyond.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say like the big two things that I see that cause the most problems, like not, just using that word loosely, would be like prolonged fluid exposure during labor and use of Pitocin during labor in whatever form, because those two things together can get a little tricky because when baby takes on a lot of fluids, they can lose weight more rapidly, and having the Pitocin exposure can make our milk supply kick off a little bit slower. So those two things combined can sometimes cause a little bit of issues, but again, it's not anything that you have to, refuse an induction because you're worried about that. It's just worth noting that way. If you're like, baby's lost a lot of weight, then we can work backwards and be like, well, how long did we have fluids during our labor? Or if you feel like your milk supply is slow to come in, we can, same thing, look back at different choices that were made during your labor and know that, okay, this is probably why, and then plan accordingly. So I would say those are the two biggest ones. Beyond that, more just like generally speaking, I think how empowered or not you feel during your labor and your birth can definitely affect your mindset postpartum. I know that definitely happened for me. I was like, everything went sideways. Like, is breastfeeding going to be this way too? So I feel like preparing for both sides of things, at least if one thing's not quite going the way you want, you know that you feel empowered and confident on the other side for like breastfeeding and whatnot. So I think it's just a lot of mindset stuff. But as far as like practical things, I would say the fluid exposure and Pitocin are the big two that I see most often being a little bit problematic.
Okay, that's funny. It doesn't I think the fluids one gets talked about a lot or, if you are digging a little bit, you'll find that one, like mom's getting fluid means baby gets fluid. And then, but I don't feel like we hear the Pitocin one quite as much. But I liked what you said too, just that idea that doesn't then mean we refuse an induction, or that if we're induced, it means we can't breastfeed. I remember bringing this up once on my Instagram account, and we were chatting about some of this, like in my stories, and I ended up asking the question, like, if you had Pitocin, how did breastfeeding go? And there were so many of it. It was great. I felt like it had no impact, and so I think it's valuable to remember that lots of us get to our breastfeeding experience with lots of fluids on board, with Pitocin on board, with whatever else that happened. And we still can do this very well. We can do this well, and we get to where we want to be too. So, but it is valuable to have that info when those conversations, I think, come up, these post-birth things we're talking about, where, the RN then walks into the room and says, hey, your baby's at 8-9% weight loss, and now it's time for us to do XYZ. And that was something I wanted to talk to you about too, because I have been the nurse, like I told you before we started, who has walked into the room many different times and said, so we weigh babies at about 24 hours of life, just as a standard most hospitals are going to. So they weigh your baby when they're born, and then at 24 hours of life, there's 24-hour screens and some checks. It's a weight check, and then you continue to have the weight of your baby taken at least about once a shift or once every 24 hours until you discharge at home. And so that first 24-hour one is often a time where a nurse could potentially be coming back into the room, or maybe they're doing all this at the bedside and they're saying, hey, baby's at 8 or 9% weight loss. And then for us, that meant we have to start talking about, what are we going to do if we were above 7 to 8%? Those numbers were okay. It was just more, let's make sure that they're feeding frequently every 2 to 3 hours. And then if we got above 8, 9, 10, then it was like, we have to do something more specific. And so that could be, we need you pumping after, which I don't really think the electric pump helps a ton in these early hours anyway, but we need you feeding more often. We need you supplementing with donor milk or formula. Like, all of a sudden, it just started this whole conversation. So what would you say to the mom who has a provider like myself, someone walk in and start to have that conversation of, the baby's at about 8.5% weight loss, so we would like to start XYZ. Like, how does a mom approach that, especially if maybe they had some of these things go on during their birth that you just talked about?
Yeah. And so my favorite phrase is like, what would happen if we wait? Like, always feel comfortable to ask that, whether it's during birth or with feeding stuff, anything with your
It's the
babies. What
best
would happen
phrase
if we
ever.
wait?
Yep. What
Yeah.
if we do nothing? Yep.
Yeah. So always feel free to ask that. I would say, unfortunately, a lot of moms who don't know those connections about the fluids and different things, they can, it's scary. It's the same thing. It's like during your labor, if they're like, well, we could listen to you, or, your baby could get sick and
Yes.
die. And it's like,
Yep.
it's the same, it's like, or your baby could starve. And so nobody wants to hear
Right.
that. So just understanding you can ask what happens if we wait. And with the fluid loss, I mean, every case is different. And so it's really hard for me to just say like a general number, but I have certainly had clients who've had more weight loss than like that 8 or 9%. And then they've like waited it out, and then things have been okay, and they've not had to introduce anything else. So it really depends on the situation. So understanding all of the risks, benefits, etc., and then making an informed decision, and understanding the good news and bad news about being the mom is that you are the boss, which means you get to make decisions, but then at the same time, you're responsible for the consequences of the decisions. So ultimately, no one can make you, within reason, they can't make you do anything you don't want to do. They're not going to let you just not feed your baby for a long time. But generally speaking, yeah, we get to decide.
I think that response of, what if we just do nothing right now? Or just even saying, not even asking, but just saying, I'd like to continue doing what we're doing for the next 4 hours. Like, choose a time frame that you're comfortable with based on what you know or what you're thinking. And also, like, you have the autonomy to do that as well. And, say, like, I recognize what's going on here or whatever. And then also, this is what I'd like to do. I think sometimes when we're holding the babe in our arms, or they're crying, or if we are thinking, oh, this latch doesn't feel great right now, it's easy to get in our own heads and start to think, they are starving. I have no milk. Like, I don't see anything coming out. The nurse seems worried, or whomever, and it's easy to get in your head and kind of stop either trusting what you learned before, or trusting what you know about the process, or trusting what you know about milk supply, and that at this point you have this much, and then at this point it starts to change. Like all of that preemptive knowledge can be so valuable to fall back on in these moments where we think my baby's crying. Maybe they are really hungry. Because I feel like that, Amber, the number of times a mom has said, I think she's really hungry, like just because they're, a newborn baby crying. And it can be so hard to say, well, yes, they're crying. Like babies cry. There's lots of things going on. And also, but it's okay, like we're okay. If you're comfortable sitting in this, like it's okay to keep doing what you're doing and keeping trying and keep feeding or whatever. I think it's just good example of, or good evidence of how easy it is for us to get in our heads when we don't have that good knowledge and that good foundation and that kind of just trust in what we know what we know to be true about our bodies and what's going on and what's coming and stuff like that. So let's say we are going to supplement, or the weight loss is 12% or something, like something where it is indicated, hey, until your milk comes in or something, we need to do a little bit more. How do you kind of walk with your moms through that conversation if they want to be like an exclusively breastfeeding mom? And that's the goal. And I know like whether or not they want to introduce a bottle at this point, stuff like that. But what are some things that you would talk to someone preparing for that possibility?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely think touring your hospital if that's possible, or at least asking questions about donor milk, how that looks. Are you allowed to bring your own milk in? Which in most cases you are if you have your frozen colostrum, et cetera. So I mean, understanding like the policies and whatnot around that stuff would be really great. I think doing some research on if you were to need formula, what's the formula that your family feels most comfortable with having, rather than just being reliant on the hospital formula. But I think a lot of hospitals do have policies about preparing powdered formula because you don't have boiling water and all of those things. But you can have, pre-made, ready to drink formula. So yeah, I think just understanding like if things were to go sideways, like what would your like optimal, like your good, better, best, like where would you want to fall on those? And then having a clear understanding of how you would personally want to navigate those different choices as they come up, I think would be really useful for sure.
Do you have specific feelings about, again, we're still talking like first couple days, you're still in, let's say you're still inpatient for this, introducing a bottle at that point, if you are going to go ahead and do some donor milk or formula, whatever, because it's indicated, needed, you want it. If a mom wanted to exclusively breastfeed, would you encourage her to do syringe, do cup, do spoon, and avoid a bottle this early?
Yeah, so I mean, I walk through that with moms prenatally. Like there are some like risks to using bottles in the sense of like nipple preference and whatnot. But it's again, our babies are so adaptable and clever that it's not the end of the world. I think for moms, if using the syringe or the spoon or the cup feels cumbersome and annoying and it's stressing you out and you would feel better using a bottle, then let's do the thing that's going to stress you out the least. I mean, it's any choice is going to work and you can make any choice work later on. Like having done a bottle you can still have your breastfeeding journey that you desire to have. So it really depends on your goals. If you try one and you're like, this is frustrating, I feel like I'm doing it wrong, and you'd feel better using a bottle, then all good. We can work with that.
Yeah. Guys, do you hear how she's just can work with whatever? Like, I love that about you, is that you're like, anything you do now is not like predictive of everything that has to happen later. Because I think so much of this ends up feeling so black and white. Like, even going back to skin to skin, I didn't get skin to skin, so this isn't going to work out. Or I had this happen, so my supply is never going to come in. Or I had to do a bottle early or supplement early, which means I'm not going to be able to get off the bottle. Like, I think we can feel like once we've done something that we can't ever come back from that. And you would have even more personal experience in this too with work as well. But like, I just don't think that that's true. I think that there are, so like you talked about good, better, best, like there are times we're going to hit good, and there's times we're going to hit better, and there's other things that we're going to hit best, and there's times we may not even hit good, but like eventually it can all still come together and end up being what we wanted to, or we're going to get to the goals that we were hopeful for. And I think we get a little lost in the weeds of not getting better or not getting best sometimes. And it's more, we just got to like take those bumps in the road and be ready for them, and know that the end goal is still like more than achievable.
Yeah, for sure. And I know those first few days with baby and even weeks are so important and they're so valuable, but in the grand scheme of your breastfeeding journey, they are a fairly small piece. So like you're saying, if things don't start out quite right, yeah, there's so much we can do. We have so much time to work on things.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, I think we can stop there for now. Is there anything else you want to add, either specific to those first couple days that we were talking about, or beyond as well?
I would say always remember the IBCLC near you is not your only option. There's lots of people like myself who work virtually. If we're talking prenatally, you can meet with several IBCLCs, assuming your insurance is cool with multiple billings. Like I said, Aetna's the only one that has limits. But so doing that, you can interview people just like you would a doula. So find someone who resonates with you because maybe you want someone who's a little bit more crunchy or a little bit more chill or whatever. Just find what works for you and just understand that you have choices in that. It's not like you're stuck with only the person who's at the hospital or at your OB's clinic. So that's the main thing I would say, whether that's prenatally or postpartum.
Hmm. I will say my facility had LCs on staff all the time, and then you were allowed to come back to them. But I think it's important to know that insurance isn't typically tied to you have to go to the one that's at the hospital you deliver at. It's simply like we provide lactation consult reimbursement, right? So like
Mhm.
Amber said, you can choose who that is if you don't want to use the one at the hospital, or you don't hit it off with them, and so you want someone different, or you just want to figure it out before. More often than not, you know way more about insurance than I do. Like you can find your person. It doesn't have to be just the one who is maybe at the facility that you're delivering, that's the only one insurance is willing to cover or allow for you. That's typically not the case. So,
For sure. Yeah, yeah. And if you have like an IBCLC that you like seeing in person for one thing, but you're dealing with like bottle refusal and you want to work with someone on that, you can see multiple people. Your care team can be full of as many people as you need. So I definitely always encourage people to build a really good care team, both prenatally and postpartum, for sure.
okay, that's making me ask one more question because do you think it's complicated at all to have like different? I've had a lot of moms, like even in my DMs and stuff, saying, I had one LC tell me this and one LC tell me that. Like just a little tip or thought on how moms can kind of navigate the fact that you will get different tips and different input, even from CLCs, IBCLCs, whatever. Like it's not always everybody feels the same way. Like you said, you've got more crunchy or more this or more that, and it will come out differently in their education and support.
For
So
sure. Yeah. So I would say it's like a situation of like take what you like and leave the rest. I definitely have had moms come to me and I can tell they were kind of like almost on the defense about like some of the choices that they were making, whether it was like using a bottle at night or sleeping with their baby, whatever side. And I'm like, it's all good. You can tell me the truth. I'm not going to like, fear monger you about something on either side. So I think just if you get advice from someone and you're like, that doesn't feel right, then just ignore it. Like you're allowed to ignore people's advice. That's going to get you really far in motherhood, just learning to ignore people's advice.
yeah, and what you just said of like take what you want and leave the rest. You're allowed to do that. You don't have to like just take everything someone says as gospel and that's all that you're going to hold on to too. You can pick and choose. Like you said, we're going to be doing this our whole lives with our kids. It's picking and choosing what we feel good about and
Oh,
applying
yeah.
that and leaving the rest. So, okay, one totally unrelated question, but I've been asking everyone at the end, and I didn't warn you because I want you to just tell me what comes to your mind. But what is like one thing that's just sparking joy in your life right now? Anything.
Oh, the fact that it's sunny outside. I love the sunshine. So the spring and vitamin D, that is wonderful. I'm loving that right now.
That is so funny. I just did a podcast with someone yesterday and they said the same thing. So as soon as you looked out your window, I thought, she's going to say the sun. Clearly, we're all fiending for sun after the long winter. Okay. All right, Amber, where can people find you or get support and get more from you?
Yeah, so I'm at Amber the IBCLC on most social media platforms like Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. And my website is just thelatchlink.com. I have a blog on there with lots of information. I have a podcast called The Latch Lounge. And yeah, I think that's everything. And like I said, I do accept insurance, Aetna, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, and UHC. If you have those covered 100%, all across breastfeeding, you don't have to wait for things to be going sideways to get help. So yeah, just reach out. I love working with moms on everything related to infant feeding and breastfeeding.
Okay, thank you so much, Amber. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lo and Behold podcast. I hope there was something for you in today's episode that made you think, made you laugh, or made you feel seen. For show notes and links to the resources, freebies, or discount codes mentioned in this episode, please head over to loandbeholdpodcast.com. If you aren't following along yet, make sure to tap subscribe or follow in your podcast app so we can keep hanging out together. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you're doing a really good job. A little reminder, opinions shared by guests of this show are their own and do not always reflect those of myself and the Labor Mama platform. Additionally, the information you hear on this podcast or that you receive via any linked resources should not be considered medical advice. Please see our full disclaimer at the link in the show notes.